And cut.
It's about a little person who is an orphan living in a small, strange town, rather isolated, partially by choice, partially by just the nature of being a little person in a small town. He has an artistic bent, but doesn't find enough time to express himself outwardly, so there's a very interpersonal dynamic with him. And he has a very quirky, unusual friend who has a lot of confidence and has a very laissez-faire attitude. And the dynamic between them really demonstrates his lack of cohesion with the rest of the world. But it also demonstrates that he's someone you can care about because he has a friend.
Lucas is kind of the drug dealer here, probably like soft drugs and just a good time, happy party guy, and kind of goes from place to place trying to make everybody feel happier. And kind of, I think his relationship to Harvey is of he sees him as a lost soul and wants to kind of draw him out of his shell and draw him out more into the world. But I think mostly they probably just get together and watch movies and hang out and chat and kind of spend a lot of time just alone together.
And he meets a young woman, and that's when some real changes begin in his life, not necessarily sexual or romantic, but where he discovers that he's a little bit more than he thought he was. So the movie's essentially a coming of age. It's not a romance, it's not an action film, it's about a young man discovering that he's worth more than he thought he was.
It's not an unusual thing for little people to date sort of, more average-sized people. And yet there's a load of complications that go on with it, anywhere from society and their view on it and just the physical practicalities of it, and I wanted to really delve into that a little bit.
My character comes across him at one point in the movie and sort of takes a liking to him and can almost sense that he's a very lonely and introverted person, and she's lonely as well, and that's sort of what gravitates her towards him. So it's a really neat little relationship that develops between them.
And it's a nice sentiment and a nice film without. It takes you from a low point and brings you to a high point that isn't too high that you can't feel as though that might have actually happened.
He realizes that the people around him that he views as being so perfect and so happy are just as flawed as he is.
It's, I guess, the insignificance of Harvey, the evolution of the character is that he becomes significant to himself, which is really the most important thing for human growth.
If you want me, you are high. You make it.
Jeff is this guy who has this idea with this great script, and he finds people like yourselves and all the people that, the 50 or whatever people that are involved in this movie, and extras and people, everyone's working for nothing or next to nothing, and it constantly amazes me when you try to put out some creative energy into the world.
I wouldn't have appreciated the story if it all ended too well. It ends in a very, I want to say, realistic way. It's like we've taken a slice out of Harvey's life. We could have seen him months before when nothing was happening, or we could see him down the road where he's left the village and who knows what he's up to. So this is just this little important part of his life where he's made a change.
But it's basically about people who feel quite alone. Harvey, especially in Dakota and Lucas, people who feel kind of left out by the world, finding people who, for a moment in time, they find each other and feel less alone in the world.
There's a great line that when I was writing the script, that my story consultant actually sort of popped up with, and it's a line that Queen Elizabeth used to use, funnily enough, and she goes, only other people can make you feel small. And that, I really like that. I mean, that's sort of, for me, that summed up the film.
Want me, you are high. Taboo, taboo, taboo. Taboo, taboo, taboo. Make it hard not to fall farther than an apple to the orchard floor. I am the one that landed well off of the tree. You are the fruit so ripe and so...
I guess my favorite scene in the movie for me, and I haven't seen it, but it was difficult, but I like the challenge. I like having to concentrate as an actor, professionally, to really focus when a crying scene, because I've never had any crying scenes in any films that I've worked on. So that was, because it was so challenging, and because it was so new to me, it ended up being both a personal and professionally exhilarating experience. So I would say any scene in which I had to be overly tearful was an experiment. I'm not sure if it worked, but actors like the feeling of challenging themselves, of getting to new territory, even if it's scary. So the new territory parts are always the best ones.
That is a picture wrap on the Yeti costume.
Yes. We're gonna eat the head for dinner.
I gave up on Yeti.
I found a lot of the scenes really fun or challenging to do in this movie. Like so many of them. I don't even know where to start, but one of them is definitely where I sing. I had to write my own song for the movie, and I had to sing it and perform it on the guitar, and that was incredibly challenging for me. I've never done that before in a movie, and like kind of shared my own work, you know, based on what Dakota wants to show to Harvey. So that was incredibly challenging and just like a really nice turning point for me to be able to do that and to get through it.
There's a moment where he's waiting for Dakota in the village to meet her because she's offered to help him clean up the dog, and he's trying to like lean on a post in the village. He's kind of trying to figure out like how to look cool, and then he kind of gives up on it. And it's little moments like that are my favorite in the movie. There's no dialogue. It's just things that Jordan does as a really great actor, and that sort of come together in these great little moments that say a lot about the character in the story. And action.
Cut. Thanks, Grant. I think when people watch the movie, they'll know that it's not the usual kind of fare that you usually see where everything's sort of laid out for you and you're spoon-fed a kind of like a story where you know what to expect.
I think like there's a lot of issues surrounding being a little person, and I'm sure Jordan can attest to that. And I think that just showing them as a person and showing that it's a bit of a struggle sometimes, but also showing that you know, they have the ability to connect with somebody and that they want to connect with somebody just like everybody else in the world does is an important message, and that's, you know, for being a little person or for being anybody, just showing that people have these secret, you know, desires to be liked and accepted.
From a little person standpoint, I would people who aren't little would take away the idea that being a little person is just a dynamic. It doesn't define you, and that you can have the same kind of just normal emotions everyone else has. It's not all about being small; it's about being you. So I think that's going to be good. You know, it's going to humanize a little person. They're not just going to be a little person; they're going to be a character in a film. So that's helpful to remove stigmas about, you know, people with wheelchairs or people with different races. Like they don't think much differently than anybody else. We all kind of are fairly similar people. You know, we think we're all individual and we're all, you know, there's a lot about humans that are just exactly the same.
These are ideas that resonate throughout the world. I mean, everyone has that feeling of being the little person, and having other people in the world judge them and being affected and influenced by that. And it's, you know, their decision whether or not they want to let that bother them or whether or not they want to actually go on with their lives and make themselves into who they want to be. It's a universal theme.
Quiet, we're rolling! Frame. Action.
I don't know if you're so bold, but I am scared, but I am piping hot for your love. If you want me, you are
Nice save!
Alright, that's a cut!
taboo, taboo, taboo.